And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. Just want to show you some of these beautiful scenes that I have right now. Take a look at the sunset there over San Francisco. That is beautiful. Well, in the meantime, we do want to move on to some more of these other top headlines here, include this one. It's a pretty big one. I want to put this tweet up here from FBI Director Kash Patel. He says this: I can now report that today the FBI, along with our interagency partners led by Attorney General Pam Bondi, arrested 2 active duty U.S. Army soldiers and 1 former U.S. Army soldier for theft of government property in a bribery scheme. He says these individuals have been charged with stealing America's defense intelligence capabilities and empowering adversaries like China in betrayal of our country. He says they will now face justice. Let's talk about this even further with national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer, who joins me. Hal, good to be with you here. I got to say, why did these keep happening? You and I have discussed several instances of almost the exact same indictment in just the last year. What say you?
Well, under the Chinese intelligence services are very aggressive throughout all the Pacific. They're trying to get as much intelligence as they can. Look, it's not a secret that the U.S. and China anticipates that they may get into a conflict one of these days. And so they're trying to gather intelligence. This one's kind of interesting, though. This was an Army lieutenant, a commissioned officer, who worked, kind of interestingly, worked in health services as an administrator, kind of an unusual prospect. Usually when they're recruiting sources, they look for access. I'm not quite sure what access they thought, other than the fact that he was a officer in the Army. And then there was a sergeant, an NCO, who actually is a supply sergeant. Again, kind of an interesting choice, but they were able to get quite a bit of intelligence on some pretty important systems. And then there was a former soldier that used to be based. Now, this is up in what's called Joint Base Lewis McChord, what's used to be called McChord Air Force Base, and Fort Lewis, which is an Army base up there. And they were able to get a lot of intelligence on a variety of things, to include some details on the Stryker vehicles, which are being used in Ukraine. I should mention. Also, information on the HIMARS system, which is being used to great effect in Ukraine. And then, of course, also information on some of our exercises. And that may seem kind of strange, but it gives them a lot of depth of knowledge and understanding of how we're going to operate in a combat environment, and of course, adjust their tactics, techniques, and procedures accordingly.
Yeah, this was brought in 2 separate jurisdictions, the District of Oregon and the Western District of Washington there. The indictment alleging that beginning on or about November the 28th, 2021, and continuing to at least on or about December 19th of just last year, that Duan and Tian, along with others, known and unknown to the grand jury, conspired with each other to surreptitiously gather sensitive military information related to the U.S. Army's operational capabilities, including technical manuals and other sensitive information. And this is all in return for cash, for money. And to your point, Al, some of these operatives kind of targeting lower level people on the supply chain, so to speak, low guys on the totem pole.
What they're doing it well, and it's interesting. The cash, you can think, okay, they're committing treason, espionage. $50,000. That was the total, and they'd been doing this for years, from what I understand. And it's interesting how they were doing this. Working, together. You had the former sergeant, and then you had Lieutenant Tian and Sergeant Chow that were working together to gather this intelligence. And there's a lot of things. Some of it was classified. They said some of it was secret documents, top secret even. I'm not quite sure why they had access to top secret, but they did. And so they got some fairly, when it's top secret, that will cause damage to our national security. That's why it's called top secret. And so they were able to get that. But then there's also just a lot of other things that would be very sensitive information that they would pass over. And it gave the Chinese tremendous insight. And I should mention that that area up there in Seattle, Tacoma area, where Fort Lewis is, where McChord is, and then there's a couple of major naval bases up there as well. that's one of those base cluster areas where there's just a lot of things going on. So if you're inside the fence line, so to speak, if you're inside working in that environment, you can see things, observe things, which would be of great value to an adversary intelligence service. And that's what they did. And they're going to be looking at how were they recruited. They're going to be looking at all the trade craft that was used in running these sources, of course. And the big thing we'll be looking for is there anybody else?
Uh,
And that's going to be the big question. And it may sound a little strange, but they may pick up on some threads up in the Lewis McChord area that lead to other bases, installations around the country. And so they'll be looking very closely at this. And, it's not,
yeah.
Army counterintelligence, obviously very involved, but the FBI is involved. And I would be surprised if Air Force OSI isn't, extensively involved with this as well. And I think they are. But I would also think that NCIS would be looking at this because of the proximity of those bases
Oh,
to these very sensitive naval installations. Both of which big operational bases, but one of which is where our boomers, our big, nuclear missile submarines operate out of. That's not that far away. So they were in a key area.
I see.
And by the way, I want to point out, if you remember, not too long ago, there was another instance not too dissimilar with the Navy down in Southern California, where
Right.
they were, and again, the individuals involved didn't have direct access necessarily to something that I would consider highly sensitive, but they were recruited by Chinese intelligence, and they were able to provide a lot of valuable information for China and for us. It's a dangerous penetration of our security situation.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that. How do some of these Chinese operatives go about recruiting and grooming, members of the armed forces here? And where is the chain in the link that is weakest that leads authorities to find out that this is actually happening? Because this particular operation, I mean, it lasted 2.5, almost 3 years. I'm reading from a part of the statement put out by the DOJ, Hal. They say this: "We remind all members of the Army team to increase their vigilance and protect our Army by reporting suspicious activity here." So before it gets reported to be suspicious, it has to be observed. It has to be seen. How was it in this case?
In this case, they probably just saw unusual activity, saw them accessing materials that they shouldn't be accessing. And they could have picked up on some unusual things in terms of when they leave, when they come, may have picked up on who they were meeting with. There's a lot of different ways that this can be picked up on. And actually, one of the ways classically is we'll pick it up on through other means, for example, signals intelligence or something like that. And that will be the tipper that allows you to kind of work your way back, walk the cat back, if you will, to whomever the source is. And part of it is that they could have been, we could have been picking up on that they had access to this material, and looking at the nature of all the different things that they were getting, that could have helped us zero in on where they would have got this stuff. There could have been something there that was a tip that, oh, it's a Northwest, Pacific Northwest based source that they're working, and that could have allowed them to do that. Now, I know there's going to be some out there that immediately jump to conclusions. They're going to say, oh, well, they have Chinese names. So and for all we know, maybe there was some trade craft employed where they were using ethnic Chinese nationalism or something like that. I don't know what that is, but that's been used. Look, spies will do anything to recruit a source. They will work anything they can, but usually it's money. I got to tell you, more often than not, they just find people that are in need of money, and then they provide a solution. And that's really what spy masters do.
Yeah.
Is they find somebody who's got a problem and they provide a solution, and the solution is, I will fix your problem, and then you will spy for me. And that's how they work. And that's probably what they did here. They just, they kind of went, these are not very senior level personnel. They're junior level personnel. And I'm sure as we get into it, based on the fact there was $50,000, which frankly, just the low sum indicates to me that they found something where they were in trouble. All right. And it could be a lot of things. It could be gambling, could be,
Sure.
we don't know. But they were able to use that money to pay them off. And then, they puff up their egos and do all sorts of other things, which that's how you run a spy.
So Hal, are you alluding to the fact there might be speculation that these individuals are not U.S. citizens? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You have to be a U.S. citizen to be a member of the U.S. Army.
I wasn't saying that at all.
Oh,
No.
okay.
I'm just saying, yeah,
Lost
I'm
in
just looking at the
translation.
names, and I'm saying that may have been something that they used as a tool, if you
see.
will, to try and ethnicity. Look, that can be used as a tool.
I see.
World War II was used as a tool. You know, the Germans were famous for that. They had the bomb society in the U.S., and they recruit a lot of German Americans, ethnic German Americans, as sources back in the 1930s. So
Okay.
that's not a new concept
Okay.
in doing things like that.
Hal, lastly here, what do you think the military needs to do as an institution in trying to thwart this or instances of these from ever happening in the first place here? Are there holes in the dam, so to speak, that they need to shore up to stop this?
I will tell you this: there is a lot of counterintelligence stuff. If you're on military installations, you know there is a stuff. You know, the old loose lips sink ships, and there's a kind of an updated one that says loose tweets sink fleets, sort of thing, which is talking about social media, talking about all this other stuff. But part of it is, I will say, in the Cold War, and I kind of span a couple areas here, but during the Cold War, we had a very aggressive counterintelligence program. I mean, it was very clear who the enemy was and how they were recruiting, and we kind of drilled that into our personnel. And then we didn't have that monolithic enemy anymore.
Right.
Now we have a pure competitor, which is China. And I'm not saying that Russia and Iran are not trying to spy on us as well. They're very actively trying to spy on us. But I think we're going to have to probably take a good look to see, are we building the same level of awareness, threat awareness with that we built with the Soviet Union way back when? And if the decision is that we're not, then I think we need to really get more aggressively in dealing with the threat of Chinese intelligence, because it's very clear, certainly around the Pacific Rim, that they are very aggressive. They are here and they're recruiting like crazy.
Wow.
And by the way, it's not just Department of Defense. Department of Energy's had problems. Other parts of the federal government have problems. And also, one of the things with the Chinese, which is kind of interesting, is they've been recruiting heavily, putting sources heavily into state and local governments. And that's been a rather innovation, because there is, I will say, today compared to, say, 30, 40 years ago, there's a lot more interface with the federal DoD side and state and local.
Okay.
And they've recognized that the security is more lax at the state and local level, so they can put sources, gather intelligence, at least on the human intelligence side, much more easily. That way they can infiltrate and gather intelligence, and it's gone all the way up. I mean, you're talking mayors, governors' offices, congressmen, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the story last summer. It was really big at the time. A former aide to Governors Cuomo and Hochul there in New York was arrested for something you were just describing there. Hal, always a pleasure. That was a major story. Glad we got to it. Have a good weekend.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.